Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. By any measure, it was more than band members at St. Louis University High School might have hoped for or expected during a visit to Italy for performances at several religious sites. The students at the Jesuit High School had set up to play at St. Peter's Square. Then it happened. But I'll let those who were there explain. With me in studio, Jeff Pottinger is SLUH's music and band director, and two members of the band, flutist Bryce Van Bree and alto saxophonist Emanuel Parker. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us today.
Thank
you look no worse the wear after a long flight from Europe, but again, good to have you back home. Jeff, let me begin with you. Just kind of set the scene for us, would you?
Well, we were in St. Peter's Square, and there's thousands of people around us, and the papal audience had just ended, and we decided we had kind of a neat moment because I really wanted the boys to play something, and at the time I didn't want it to be a very selfish thing, so actually we prayed beforehand that it would be a religious experience, that it was for the glory of God, if you will. And just as a neat moment, we played this beautiful piece that was specially arranged by Rick Flouting for us on a Bach tune called O Sacred Head Now Wounded. And we just started kind of slowly, and it was a beautiful, quiet piece. Next thing you know, there's people coming up all around us, of course, tourists that are taking pictures and whatnot.
You know, we can hear that because someone posted on Facebook, took a cell phone video of it, and we can hear kind of the ambient sound in St. Peter's Square there as that was happening. Bryce, walk us through what's going on right now.
Oh, my. So, let's see. At that point, I believe the Pope began walking down the steps, and if I remember correctly, the Pope-mobile had just pulled up in front of us, and my nervousness began mounting, and it was interesting because the second the Pope walked over, my nervousness kind of just vanished. It was weird. And for the rest of the piece, it continued like that, and I don't know, the Pope he took my nervousness away somehow.
Emanuel, were you fully aware that this was, in fact, the Pope who was wandering around in front of you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a big shock for all of us, I think. I remember when he drove by at the papal audience, I think we were all thinking that the story we'd come back with was we were 10 feet away from the Pope when he drove by, and then all of a sudden we were on the steps and he was walking down, and just a huge shock, but very exciting for sure.
Jeff, this is all happening as you're getting ready for the performance that you were talking about in Play Now. People just kept doing what they were doing.
Yeah, well, and a little bit out of context, we actually played seated in the seating area for a little bit before the guard came up and said, "Who are you and where are you from?" And at that time, I thought I might be arrested. I didn't know what was going on. And then they said, "Come up to the steps and play." So we left the barricaded area, went up to play, and at that point we thought, well, the Pope's going to walk by and he might wave to us. And then when we saw him come down the steps, we played that song I had mentioned again. And, there's this moment of I think you can hear it if you listen very carefully. I'm saying, oh, my gosh, it's the Pope, because he's walking over to us. And I'm thinking, do I stop? What do we do? Do we play? And, I look up and the trumpet section's supposed to be playing and they're all just staring at the Pope. I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's the Pope, Well,
Bryce, you are being called something of a hero because you continue playing when he was standing right in front of you, staring at you.
Yeah, I attribute that to the calmness that, I don't know, was granted upon me in some way.
How do you explain that? I mean, I've seen you saying this before and seen you quoted as saying this, a certain feeling, a spirituality came over you.
So this is kind of, I don't know, a bit off topic, but so my grandma, she died about a year ago, and she was a huge musician. She was very, very talented in music. And before every performance, I actually kind of asked her to help me with the nervousness and all that. So I think that was part of it, actually.
Right. Mm-hmm. Emanuel, how about you? Did you keep playing when all of this was going on?
I did keep playing, I think, followed by the shock and excitement. There was definitely a lot of nervousness, but we just kept playing and put on the best performance that we could. And I think at that point it didn't really matter so much, the little technical details in our playing, but it was more about just really being musicians and doing the best that we could. Yeah.
Jeff, I get the impression this maybe wasn't the very best performance they ever had, but it was certainly adequate for the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it really was. And the interesting thing I think about it was just that that Pope Francis stayed with us that whole time. And then afterwards was just so personal, and you can just feel, I mean, it was just magical. You could feel the Holy Spirit in the moment, and the place was abuzz. And his time with the boys was just, wonderful. I'd love to, this week, to take some time and to write him a letter to know what he's done for us. In doing so, it's just something you don't see somebody that's the most powerful person in the Christian, world to take the time to do that.
What sort of interaction was there in terms of conversation, or was there? I mean, there's clearly a language situation.
Well, I remember a few things he said. I wish I remembered it all. I'm sure it was fantastic, but I literally was out of my body, He asked about the piece, the arrangement. He said the boys, were fantastic and the music was beautiful. And he asked about the school, which I explained, that we were Jesuit. He's Jesuit, so I was excited to tell him that. And it was our 200th anniversary, and this was a big impetus for us to be here and to be a part of that. And it was just, for Jesuits to share this with Pope Francis is priceless.
Yeah. I was taken by the fact that he is the first Jesuit Pope, and yours is a Jesuit institution. I wonder if that had any impact at all on him in terms of his coming over to be a part of the group. What do you think, Bryce?
I think that's definitely a good assumption that he probably was impacted by that in some way. I can definitely assure you that our school is taking it very, very seriously that we got to meet the first Jesuit Pope. So I think that's part of it.
Any thoughts on that, Emanuel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say for us as a school, being a Jesuit school, in our theology classes, we've talked a lot about the Pope. I remember learning about his papal encyclical, Laudato Si, and really just talking about the tremendous influence that he's had, with Laudato Si. Months later, you see the first negotiations on the Paris climate change accords. The year before that, in 2014, he wrote letters to Fidel Castro and President Obama and started to facilitate the Cuban thaw. So it really, in that moment, I really was aware, here's a man, he's taking his time to listen to us, and he just has a tremendous influence on our world. So whether you're, Catholic, Christian or not, he really does, that is something to really appreciate. Yeah.
Jeff, weren't you there to visit with a SLUH grad who was employed by the Vatican?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Greg Burke, 1978, who's the director of the press for the Holy See. And ironically enough, after you meet the Pope, you tend to forget everything else in the world. We were actually walking to lunch, and we're halfway there, and I stopped the group. I'm like, wait a second, we have to go meet with Greg Burke, So we had a great little trip back to see him, and he was so gracious with his time and actually very forthcoming with his career and his personal life and his faith. It was a wonderful, I think, experience for the boys to be so close to somebody who's done so much.
Was he there on the premises when the Pope was with you?
No, he was not. Yeah, he was not at the time. He was very close to us. To where St. Peter's, he's just literally you just walk out of St. Peter's, first building on your left. So
there were other people there. Obviously, St. Peter's Square is always a very busy place.
Yeah.
What was the reaction like of people who were just there watching you folks?
Shock and awe, wouldn't you boys say? I didn't get to see him as much. My back was to them, but when I turned around, there's just, I don't know, there's probably 1,000 people that had stayed around after the papal audience and were filming and videoing I think they were just as excited for us as we were. It was really a neat moment.
When you think back on it, Bryce, what comes to mind? I've seen the pictures, and you're very much concentrating, seemingly, on your music and on your instrument. And certainly with the Pope being 3 feet in front of you, you knew that was going. What about the rest of the ambience?
So you could see the people in the audience. They were actually all crowding up at the barriers, just like the Pope was, like at the same time when the Pope was driving around in his Pope-mobile. And I think that was kind of part of the fact that, one, I know that Italians, we were told by our tour guide, Elizabeth, she was a great tour guide, but one of the things she told us is that Italians love music. So with them crowding
that's
up
an
like
understatement.
Yes. But I think that was definitely part of it, that they just love music so much over there, and that was definitely part of the ambience of their enjoyment of music, of their crowding up against the barriers almost. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
What were you taking in, Emanuel?
I think as high school musicians, we spend a lot of time focusing on festival scores or memorizing scales, and a lot of the time we don't really focus so much on just taking a step back and thinking about what it really means to be a musician. And I think moments like that are what really remind you of why we do what we do, why we spend so many hours practicing, and why we came across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, to go see the Pope in Rome. Yeah.
Jeff, this was all, as you've indicated, part of observing the 200th anniversary of your institution, if you will. Tell us more about the trip itself. What you were going to a number of sites, as I understand it.
Yeah, the impetus was from my wife. Several years ago, she's a choir director at Creazu, and I went with her, and it was transformative for the girls and for all the adults, and myself in particular. And I thought, this is something I just want to do as much as I can with these students, and went through a company called Peter's Way, and they are fantastic about mapping this out for you, especially in a foreign country with a foreign language. And we went to see the first thing we did, actually, I think, was played at St. Peter's Square for the Papal Blessing. We went to see St. John Tavern, the Holy Stairs, which are the stairs that were brought from Pontius Pilate's palace that Jesus was taken up to, and the boys, literally, kneel on one step at a time to go up and pray as they go. The next day, we're having Mass at St. Peter's Basilica and playing the music in this amazing space, and a very worshipful thing. I mean, I'm trying to remember everything we did. It was amazing. Went to Assisi and played outside of St. Francis of Assisi, his tomb. And they just, fill up the whole week. You were booked. We were running from place to place to place and sleeping when we possibly could. And it was just, every day you're thinking, it can't get better than this, right? Everybody kept saying that. And then, of course, the fourth or fifth day you meet Pope Francis and you're thinking, no, it can't get better than this.
Let me ask the young man here, Emanuel, I'll start with you, about the sense of religious history that you were experiencing. Was it something that you anticipated, not the meeting with the Pope, but the other sites that you visited? Were you anticipating something that you felt during this time?
I guess personally, in my own personal, religious life, I've gone through many different phases in the past 5 years. But to be there and to sort of see a really important area for I guess an area, like Jerusalem, an area that carries a lot of significance religiously, that does have a big impact. And it definitely was a really cool thing, I think. Yeah.
You hadn't been there before?
No,
I
hadn't, no.
Bryce, how about you?
So I, too, have never been to Rome, but I've heard many, many stories on the transformative aspects of Rome. And it was just amazing to actually be in the presence of things like St. Francis's body, or I think we went to the Jesu, we saw St. Ignatius's body and the hand of St. Francis Xavier, who baptized pretty much half of Asia. So, especially with us being a Jesuit school, those two saints were very, very prominent in the early Jesuit life. So to see those was just incredible. They're actually real. We've learned about them in school, of course, but to see them and actually be able to comprehend their true existence was just very, very powerful.
Jeff, you mentioned, was it Peter's Way? Is that the name of the organization?
Yes. Yeah.
You just don't set up a bandstand in the square in front of the Vatican. That's got to be a complicated process to work out, to get the proper authorization and things of that sort.
Yes, it is. Actually, even a week and a half before, we were still nailing down a few items between the instrument rental company, the Vatican. We had the Vatican Police, you have the Swiss Guard, and then, of course, you have the maestro who runs the music at St. Peter's. And luckily, it all came together. We did some creative packing, too, because last minute we were shipping some instruments that weren't allowed to be rented, if you will. And so certain students would have a cymbal in their suitcase, and somebody else might have a suspended cymbal in their suitcase. But we made it happen.
What about the decision as to what music to play in these various sites? I'm sure a lot of thought was given to that.
Absolutely. And who's playing? You know, we have a chamber orchestra that we just started a few years ago, and we have some students that were playing. We have the symphonic band that played the jazz band. And you want everybody to have an equal amount of playtime. And then as far as literature goes, we had to be sensitive in certain locations about being the season of Lent and what music we would choose. In fact, the maestro said, I asked for a list of suggestions for songs to play at St. Peter's Basilica, and he sent me one song, O Sacred Head Now Wounded. So I thought, okay, we better play that song. And it actually took a long time to find an arrangement that I found worthy. And Rick Flouting is this gentleman. I literally emailed him on a whim in the middle of the night and said, I don't know if you can rewrite this for our band. And about an hour later, about 2 a.m., he replied and he said he'd love to do it. And within days, he was sending us parts.
And you guys have got to play that without a heck of a lot of rehearsal, don't you? How tough is that?
So definitely sight reading came into it, the ability to sight read. So that tested my ability to learn music quickly for that last week we had before Rome. But I guess the man who arranged our parts he's actually a guitarist apparently. So there were a few like runs and scales in it that didn't quite match up with normal flute music. So that was interesting to learn.
Emanuel, just a piece of cake for you, I'm sure.
Well, I guess after 4 years in SLUH band, I have learned to really throw things together last minute.
We play a lot, that's right.
We do, yeah.
How about selfies? Did you have an opportunity to get any of the high points of the visit?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely did take lots of pictures. I was not one of, I think, the 3 students who were able to get a selfie with the Pope, but that's okay. I think the story and the experience is what really matters for me. Yeah.
You didn't have a selfie.
I
you
did
had
not.
A couple of great photographs of you. What about the chaperones? You had a dozen chaperones with you. I'm sure they were going nuts watching all this happen.
Crazy, you know, and all parents, so they were just so excited and crying, tearful. It was just a powerful moment for everybody.
Right. And again, going back to any conversation and the language difficulty, all I read was you sing grazie, grazie, grazie. I think everybody understands that.
Yeah.
What else comes to mind when you think back on those days that you were in Italy?
It was just a wonderful experience, you know. I tell the boys in particular, you know, that one of the most treasured souvenirs they're going to have from a trip like this is the people that they meet and the relationships they form. And there were just all these wonderful moments that you get to spend with the boys, and in many cases in religious situations. In other cases, it's them standing outside of a gelato place having a wrap-off, you know, with all the boys huddled in one big huddle that you'll never forget.
Bryce, you've only been back for a very short time. What's the reaction been to folks who weren't on the trip with you, to all the publicity you've received?
Yeah, so I don't know. So definitely getting back from all of the like very intimate relationships I've formed with several of my friends. I remember the Saturday I got back, there was like no one at home, and I have a relatively large family, and they were all at soccer games and stuff like that. But I was all home alone, and it was just very, very quiet. And I remember talking to my grandmother for a bit, and she was telling me about how I was on the news and all that. And I was like, this is so cool. But yes, it's been very, very interesting to have all these people come up to me and tell me congratulations on this experience.
Manuel, how about you? What sort of response have you received?
There's been a lot of excitement in our school community. Definitely had a lot of people in my family post about me on Facebook, and just a lot of, it's an exciting thing for us as a school and individually, for sure. Yeah.
And you're very excited about Jeff also.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah.
How have people reacted to you?
The same, you know, just a lot of response on the social media, and, you know, getting to share the story and talk about it has been a real blessing because it was just meant so much to so many of us.
Well, thank you all for coming in. Congratulations on a obviously very successful visit to Italy. And congratulations on handling it so well and get ready for next year's trip, Jeff.
Thank you. We are truly blessed. Yeah.
That's Jeff Pottinger, music and band director at St. Louis University High School. Two members of the band with me in studio, Bryce Van Bree and saxophonist Emanuel Parker. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Archive versions of past St. Louis On the Air programs available for download or podcast at stopublicradio.org. St. Louis On the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU. You're hearing some of the music of our band friends here. Thank you all for listening. I'm Don Marsh.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.